You guys see this house behind me? How much do you think that house is worth? How much do you think that cute little cottage bungalow just shy of 1,300 square feet with 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a 4,000 square foot lot, and no garage, no carport is worth? 400,000? 800,000? That seems a little bit high. How about $1.35 million? What's up, everyone? It is a beautiful, cool spring morning here in Boulder, Colorado. My name is Christopher Madaras with Live Sotheby's International Realty. I am a real estate broker here in Boulder. If you are moving to the city, if you need some help, if you have some questions, give me a call, shoot me an email. I am here to help you out. Today, we are going to be talking about the pros and cons of living in Boulder, Colorado. Right now, I'm here on Spruce Street. We're in the Whittier neighborhood, very desirable neighborhood right near downtown. And the first con I want to talk to you guys about today is expense. So Boulder is really a high cost of living area, and that is reflected in the real estate prices. There's so many videos that talk about Boulder being expensive as like a con of the area, but I want to dig a little deeper because, just because something's expensive doesn't necessarily mean that's a bad thing, right? Like, nice clothing is expensive, but it makes sense to get nice clothing because it's well made, it'll last long, it'll fit you a lot better. But I think what people are talking about when they say that Boulder is expensive regarding real estate is they mean money does not go very far in terms of getting a house. The median sale price in Boulder for a single family home is about $1.4 million. The median home is $1 million home. But the problem is it sure doesn't feel like $1 million home. That home that we just saw on 1628 Spruce Street that does not even have any form of parking on the property is listed for $1.35 million, and it will likely sell for something around that. It's not an unreasonable price for that home given what people typically pay in this neighborhood. And so this begs the question of why are people coming to the city and paying $1 million prices for what are most certainly not $1 million houses? And we're going to explore the answer to that question in this video when we talk about the pros of living in Boulder. But the short answer is that people choose to live here because they're not buying $1 million house, they're buying $1 million location. They're buying $1 million lifestyle. 1628 Spruce Street is a little bit of a dramatic example because we're right next to downtown. Whittier is a super desirable neighborhood. It's one of the most desirable neighborhoods. But by and large around Boulder, 2,000, 2,500 square foot bi-level with average, somewhat above average upgrades, 0.15 to 0.3 acre lot. That's around what you'd get for the median sale price. And that is not $1 million home, my friends, for most people around the country, right? If you're coming from San Francisco, if you're coming from Manhattan, I have people who come from San Francisco and they're like, oh my goodness, my money goes so far here in getting me a nice home, because your money gets you even less out there. Boulder's pretty expensive. You're going to spend a lot of money to be here, and you're not going to get that nice of a house in so doing. But what are you going to get? These beautiful mountain views. We are here in the Table Mesa neighborhood at Avila Lake in the Harlow Platts Community Park. It's a beautiful spring day. As I mentioned, I'll probably say it again, but it's just so wonderful. Things are getting so green. I love filming here. It's such a beautiful place, so I always film here. After that dramatic initial showcase of what $1.5 million gets you in Boulder, this is a little more tame. So this is a really middle of the road neighborhood. You've got the lake, the park, views of South Boulder, and a shopping center just nearby. And $1.5 million around Table Mesa will typically get you a house between 2,000 and 3,000 square feet, probably bi-level, ranch, maybe a tri-level. And that'll have, again, kind of average, a little above average upgrades to it. Still not exactly $1 million home in terms of feel, but it's something with a garage. Look at these geese here. These geese? These things are evil. Don't be deceived. Don't mess with those geese. And now we're about to cross over this bridge here at Avila Lake, which is a great place for me to return back to that first pro which are these mountain views and the mountain trails. So once again, people live here because it's a $1 million location, because it has $1 million views. And I mean, these are really probably some of the best views you can get in the entire country. And along with those views, you have immediate trail access. So those mountains you can see, you can be up there. First of all, you can drive to the trailhead anywhere from Boulder in like 2 to 10 minutes, be at the base of the trail, and then in another 30 or 40, be at the tops of a bunch of those rocks you see sticking out, and you can imagine the view over the landscape. A big part of why athleisure as a sort of fashion trend is so popular around Boulder, as well as just casual dress in general, is because it's not unusual for people during their lunch break or just before or after work to go on a hike up those mountains. And like, that's a great way to start your day. It's a great way to end your day. These geese can't let me talk. Guys, can you chill? Please just relax. Anyways, now the quality of the views will vary. We're here in South Boulder, where in my opinion, you have probably the best views of the whole city. But Boulder does have restrictions. I'm gonna turn around actually so you guys can see the mountains as we walk. Boulder does have restrictions on height for new development, specifically to preserve the mountain views for everyone in the city. And that's also why anywhere you go in Boulder, you're going to get these $1 million views. All right, guys, I want to talk now about the next con of Boulder. I am on the Boulder Creek path right now. You have the creek running right down there, and then that is the Boulder Main Public Library. Beautiful area. This is kind of our like downtown park area. Just a couple streets that way, you have Pearl Street. So the next subject I want to talk about is homelessness. This is an issue that affects many different cities, and much like those cities, the people of Boulder have a variety of different opinions about it. But the one thing that everyone can agree upon is that it is a problem, and one that, you know, has some sense of urgency. In the past 10 years I've been here, it's gotten substantially worse. So right now we're on the creek path. You can see on the other side of the creek, there's really what I guess can best be described as an encampment. I mean, we used to see just like a couple bunches of tents, but now we're seeing essentially small communal gatherings of people who are homeless. It wasn't like that just 10 years ago. I mean, you'd rarely see a tent down by the creek 10 years ago, but now you kind of can't. It's hard to find a place where there isn't a tent in sight. It's a problem that's unfortunate in many different ways for many different reasons. What is good to note is they're pretty friendly, they're pretty, relaxed. I mean, we do have incidents, and I don't want to do disservice to the fact that we have had issues of violence with people who are homeless, but by and large, they don't pose a particularly big threat as I think they do in other cities. For example, I actually just had my camera out. I was getting it out of my car and walking over to start filming, and one of them came up and he had a skateboard, and of course it's like, this guy's coming up, you don't know who he is, and it's kind of like a weird situation. I'm carrying all this expensive camera gear, and he was just like, hey dude, I want to like give you a shot of me like doing tricks on my skateboard. I'm like, okay, whatever, like I don't know much of a choice, I'm just gonna say okay. So I got him shooting pictures of his skateboard, and he kind of messed him up. It like took him a few times to get it right. I don't know if he got it right. I'm not a big skateboard guy. Kind of weird. It's like a strange interaction, but it's friendly, and I said thanks, and we went on his way. So generally they're pretty chill. More importantly, really, I should note, you don't typically see them kind of around like neighborhoods. I mean, most of the homeless are going to be in the downtown area or around like shopping centers. So usually there's someone panhandling outside the Table Mesa Shopping Center. There'll be a lot more downtown around Pearl, but you're not gonna see like homeless people walking around the streets of your neighborhood in a way that would make you feel unsafe. I don't really know how to end this section. It's kind of a somber point, and we're only like not even halfway through the video, but it's important. You have to bring these things up even if they're kind of awkward to do so. And again, this channel, I mean, my line of work as a real estate broker here is about helping people who move here understand really what they're getting into, so they can know what the best place either in Boulder or maybe it's just surrounding Boulder is to live in. Here's a good note to end on. See this creek? It's such a nice day out today. This creek is so pivotal. It's so important to the identity of the entire city, which I also think makes like the existence of homelessness and homelessness tents all around the creek. There's something kind of poetic about how that problem is also very close to the heart of Boulder. You know, I think it strikes deep to a lot of Boulderites, even though people might talk about it in a superficial way. It's definitely kind of a stain, I think, on the identity of the city to have it getting so out of control. And I'm sure that can be said about many cities, but maybe I'm getting a little too sentimental. Let's move on. So now we are back here at Vila Lake again, not just because I love filming here, but because of that building over there, which you might have been wondering earlier, what is that strange looking building up on the hill? And that brings us to our second pro of Boulder, Colorado, which is the school system. Boulder has such a good school system, and that school over there is Fairview High School, which is one of the most highly coveted public high schools in the entire city and in the entire region. It's actually rated 5th best in all of Colorado. It's 6th best in terms of college prep and 12th best in terms of STEM. And I mean, look at it. Look at it. It's like a resort. I mean, it's on a hill. It's got the lake view, mountain view. I mean, I can't imagine having gone to a school like that. But all of Boulder's schools are so good, especially South Boulder, which is where we're at now. A lot of people move to South Boulder literally just because of the school system. You've got Bear Creek Elementary over in the Devil's Thumb neighborhood, Horizons and Summit, 2 super highly desirable charter schools. You've got a couple of Montessori schools around here, Halcyon, which is special education in Martin Acres, and a variety of others. You know, that's something that I know is really important to a lot of people coming here, because I personally end up working with a lot of families who are relocating to Boulder, so that's something really important to keep in mind. All of these schools, of course, have representatives who you can call and consult with, and they can help you better understand the ins and outs of that particular school. But overall, the schools are really, really good here in Boulder. And, you know, it makes sense. I mean, the cost of living is very high, which means property taxes bring in a lot of revenue, which goes to the schools. Boulder is a place where a lot of families live, so education for kids is a big priority. And then, of course, Boulder is kind of a great place to have a kid in school anyways, just because, you know, I know it's not directly related to the school system, but just this city, you know, where I grew up in, there was nothing to do. And there's nothing to do in Southern Connecticut, right? So kids end up getting up into all sorts of trouble. But in Boulder, kids are less likely to get into trouble because you have so much to do. You don't just default to what I did as a kid, which is getting drunk in the woods with your high school buddies. You know, like, I mean, I'm sure that happens, but kids out here have so much more to do. They have outdoor activities, they've got all sorts of activities around Boulder. Part and parcel to having a good school system is also just having a really good environment to have a kid who's going to school. All right, guys, right now we are at the base of Linden Drive, which is the one road that leads to Boulder's most exclusive luxury mountain community, Pine Brook Hills. Right now we are in Lower Pine Brook Hills. You can see a couple homes atop the hillside that overlook the entire city. And this is the location where we are going to talk about our 4th con of living in Boulder, Colorado today, and that is fire risk. Now, fire risk is a subject that really could be covered in its own separate video, and at some point I will make one. However, today I'm going to cover some of the primary information you need to know. On December 30th of 2021, Boulder County experienced one of the worst natural disasters it's ever had in its entire history. In less than a 24-hour span of time, a grass fire started, and that burned through the city of Superior, burning over 1,000 homes, 6,000 acres of land, and causing over $2 billion of damages. This was a tragedy that really was a wake-up call to a lot of the people down in the Front Range, because the sentiment most people have, even if they wouldn't say this specifically, is that devastating wildfires were really something that happens in mountain communities where you have a lot of trees, you have a lot of foliage to burn, not out here where it's essentially flat. The tragedy, however, did not stop there for many people. Many of the owners of some of these $700,000, $800,000, $900,000 homes then went to their insurance companies to rebuild their lives, only to find out that they were only covered for half of what their home was worth. The home insurance policies they have hadn't been updated in many months, sometimes several years, which when paired with a rapidly appreciating housing market meant that very quickly the value of their home outpaced their insurance coverage. There are 2 really important points I want to make about fire risk and home insurance. The first is that it can happen. If you talk to a lot of people out here, especially in Boulder, they'll say it can't happen here. They would have said that before the fire, and now after the fire, they'll say there's so many more systems in place to prevent this that it would never happen here. And they're not entirely wrong. There is a very low probability of that sort of devastating event happening again anywhere in the Front Range, certainly in Boulder County. However, there is also a very low probability of it happening in the first place. So it's really important to respect that these kinds of natural disasters can happen and that they are part of what it means to live out here. The second point I want to make is on home insurance, and there are really two facets to this. So the first is, if you already live in Boulder and you're watching this video and you haven't spoken to your insurance agent about your home insurance in the past 6 months, like, stop the video now and go call him or her, because that's something that, again, it can happen literally overnight, as it did at the least expected time. I mean, that was the dead of winter. Who would expect a fire in the dead of winter? So it's really important to check with your home insurance agent in this rapidly appreciating market at least once every 6 months. The second facet is that you really need to treat your property insurance deadline seriously in the purchase contract when you go to buy a home. In the purchase contract, you have a period of time by which you can check if your home will be insurable and if, as a buyer, you are okay with what that quote is. For a very long time, this was never an issue. People would sometimes not even think about this deadline, but nowadays, insurance companies, just as citizens, are starting to realize there is a lot more risk to living in these areas than they previously thought, and so they are raising premiums. Now, it's not too bad down in the city, but the reason I filmed this here at the base of Lower Pine Brook Hills is because up in Pine Brook Hills, insurance quotes now are like $10,000 to $15,000 a year, almost $1,000 a month just on home insurance. And some companies have pulled out entirely. State Farm won't insure up there. There are a couple companies, Allstate, Tyler Harrington office with Allstate down in Boulder. They do a lot of Pine Brook Hills. They're great to work with, but the quotes are expensive and you need to know this going in. You don't want to get locked into a contract with a property insurance quote you financially cannot afford just because you missed the deadline. So really, really important to take that seriously, guys. And that segues actually perfectly into our next subject, which is the fourth pro, and that is the weather. So first of all, I want to show you guys, I've been hiking a little more on this trail. We were right over there discussing fire risk. You can see Linden Drive just in the distance. We're parked right up over there, and you can see this is the view of the entire city. And this is the view that a lot of people who live in Lower Pine Brook Hills, which are homes that are situated on hills like this, they have a view of the entire city. So you can see how at least Lower Pine Brook Hills has its own kind of desirability, where Upper Pine Brook Hills is more in the mountains. I've actually got a really great video on what the weather in Boulder, Colorado is like, everything you need to know about the weather. It's an amazing video. It's got my godson in it. Jetty's my friend's dog. He's the best thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life, guys, and I've got 16 children, okay? I don't have 16 children, but if I did, first of all, I'd live in Boulder because the schools are so good, and second of all, Jed would still be the best thing that's ever happened to me. Okay, let's talk about the weather. Look, Boulder has such good weather, guys. I came from New England, from Southern Connecticut, and I'm willing to make a definitive statement here that Boulder, Colorado has the best true four-season weather in the entire country. Winter is super mild out here, but it's still a true like white winter. Part of why it's so mild is because A, it's so sunny, which you've probably already heard. Boulder is super sunny year round. That is true. And so any snow that falls melts immediately. But unlike the Northeast, for example, it doesn't just freeze, it immediately evaporates. So if you're from the Northeast and you're watching this, you know when I say that you don't have to have traumatizing nights out in the driveway chopping ice with your dad, okay? I mean, it's just so easy out here wintertime. Summer, similarly, because it's so dry, you're not like sweating through your shirt all the time, and there's also not a lot of bugs, not a lot of mosquitoes because of the dry climate. Of course, you pay for that with the fire risk, but it's so great. It's really pleasant, and like it does hit 90s and sometimes low hundreds for a couple weeks in June, July. Sorry, I'm like a little out of breath. But because it's more dry out here, it feels more like 80 degrees where it's more humid, so it's not actually as bad as it sounds. Spring and fall are kind of the only downside, I guess. They're not unpleasant, but if you're someone like me who really loves a true kind of torrential rain spring or like a blazing fiery red, yellow, orange fall. We don't really have that here. I mean, it doesn't really feel like spring and fall here because there's not a lot of deciduous. Spring and fall feel more like transitionary periods where we just have like a checkerboard of summer and winter days as the summer and winter blend together. So I want to show you guys, look, you can see the mountains over there too. Anyways, watch the weather video. It's great. Weather out here is amazing. I love it. And I'm willing to bet part of the reason why people out here in general are really happy. All right, guys, we are here. We are at Farron Field, right in the heart of the CU Boulder campus, the University of Colorado at Boulder. And we'll go for a walk in a minute, I think, but I wanted to just sit here for a second and let you guys soak in this beautiful view of the Flatirons and of Farron Field. This is kind of a good place, I guess, to talk about the next con, the fourth con on our list, which is dating. Dating in Boulder is not great. You know, it's great if you're under 25. It's pretty bad if you're like 25 to 35. And, you know, it's all right if you're over 35. And the big reason for that is if you're under 25, you have the university. Pretty self-explanatory. Tons of people in that age bracket. 25 to 35, now we're starting to talk about a group of people who have probably just graduated university from Boulder, and really they're in the first or second stages of their career, and there just isn't a lot of jobs for that in Boulder. You know, Boulder is a high cost of living area. It's a high paying area, and what that means is that the job market demands usually higher skilled workers that are in that mid to later stage of their career. Most young people in Boulder graduate from CU and then they move to where all the jobs are for people looking to start their careers, which is in Denver. And you know, they've had the Boulder experience, they like it, they enjoy it, they're ready to try something new. Denver is a good shift for them. So there's just not already a big population of 25 to 35-year-olds in Boulder to start. Over 35 is kind of an interesting situation as well, because yes, there are plenty of people over 35 in Boulder, but most of them tend to be married, tend to have homes and have families and be settled. Part of the reason there's not a lot of single people over the age of 35 who would be buying condominiums and townhomes, for example, because that's what single people typically buy, right? People who buy single family homes are usually couples, and Boulder doesn't have many condominiums and townhomes because of ordinance the city has to restrict height development of any residential buildings, and has had for many decades now. There isn't really much condominium and townhome inventory as there is in a city like Denver, for example, or most cities where you can build high rises. For people who are single, Boulder isn't a great place to be, because if you want to own a place, which if you're over 35, that's probably what you're thinking about doing at that stage in your life and in your career, you don't have a lot of options in Boulder. And so I think that's like a really interesting way in which, you know, the property market kind of ties in to the lifestyle around here, even to something as minute as the dating scene. You know, it's like you can find someone if you want to find someone. It's not like it's nothing, but it's not going to be the best place to date or to find, you know, life partner if that's a really big concern for you or a big consideration, which, you know, it is for many people. We're back again at the Boulder Creek path. We're actually up the path a little bit going westward. You can see behind me is the Everett Pearson Kids Fishing Pond, just like a nice couple ponds where kids under the age of 12 can come and fish. The next pro I want to talk about is really how bikeable Boulder is. It's a small thing, but also a big thing, I know, to some people. And to give you an example, this is kind of, Boulder Creek Path is kind of a good example because you have this walking path here, which is super wide, so accommodates both bikers and walkers. And in some more trafficked areas, like where we were at that kind of central park area, it actually has lanes to denote where bikes and pedestrians are supposed to be. And then also here, we're walking on what is a dirt path going along the creek as well for people who want to walk. And so in general, Boulder, almost all the streets either have bike lanes or are just very wide and accommodate bikes, or if they don't, there's usually a path running alongside the street where you can bike down. I mean, you could live in the city and not own a car. That's totally doable, and there are people who do that. You know, when I was a student, there were a variety of people who didn't have cars, and now, you know, they're students, so they also didn't have a whole lot of places they needed to go. but they still needed to get around Boulder, get groceries, do the things that one might do, and biking was totally feasible and totally easy to do everywhere in Boulder. And the drivers, of course, are pretty accustomed to bikers, so it's also a relatively safe place to bike. Now, you do need to be careful. There's a lot of bikes, there's a lot of cars in Boulder, so it's something where, as a driver and a biker, you do need to be cognizant of both the street laws around biking and driving, as well as kind of the culture and the etiquette. And it almost leads, I want to say, into like a greater conversation about just how outdoorsy Boulder is. There's so much you can do outside in Boulder, and people here in general are super active. You can rock climb, you can hike, it's super easy, I mean, you can hike in a lot of places, but not a lot of places you can drive for 2 minutes and be on the trailhead, or just actually live, next to the trailhead. Like in South Boulder, for example, around Devil's Thumb or Highland Park, some of those neighborhoods, you have homes that literally back right up to a trailhead. And part of why people in Boulder are so active and so fit and in good shape generally is because it's really easy to be, right? It's like really easy to go for a run when you have, well, there's trees blocking it, but when you have those kinds of mountain views, or when you have a creek like this, the sort of natural beauty you have here. Or maybe you don't like to run, like me. I am not a runner, but I like climbing. I like hiking is a big one I really like doing. So those are great. Indoor climbing gyms are great here too. I love indoor climbing. That's like super my thing. We kind of started with bikes, and now we're talking about just like the outdoorsy lifestyle. But I think there's a common theme here that I also want to tie back to the housing, because it's like part of the reason that people in Boulder are okay with spending $1 million on a house that's like not as nice a house as you might get in Ohio or Louisiana or wherever else, is because people around here don't spend a ton of time in their house. Just behind me is the world famous Dark Horse Bar and Grill. This bar has existed in Boulder for almost half a century. It is located in this old brick building right here on the western end of Fraser Meadows in a shopping center that contains McDonald's, Sprouts, among a variety of other small shops, and a Boulder Inn. Depending on how long you have lived in Boulder, you likely have one of two opinions about this bar. The first is that it is a dingy, decrepit, aging bar that is past its prime and on the way out. The second school of thought is that this is a cultural icon of Boulder. It is an artifact of its heritage, of its identity as a city, and it must be preserved for the legacy of the town as an icon of what makes Boulder Boulder. In the past year, there has been quite a stir in town because the owner of this property, which is not the Dark Horse, but in fact a private entity that owns not only this building, but all of the land in the shopping center, except for that McDonald's right there, is pushing through a proposal to transform this entire shopping center into a new residential commercial development that includes terminating the lease for the Dark Horse and demolishing that building. There are many people who feel very good about this. They see it as an opportunity to restore and rejuvenate a decrepit and poorly maintained region of the city and bring it up to a beautiful Boulder, Colorado standard, while also providing much needed supply to the housing market. On the other hand, there are people who feel like it is demolishing an important part, an important facet of the history and the cultural identity of the town. Now, I'm not here today to have a conversation about to what extent the Dark Horse is a cultural icon, whether or not it should be preserved, or even if that could happen in a way that doesn't infringe upon the rights of the property owner. But it sets the backdrop for the next and final subject we're going to talk about today, which is change. I grew up in a small town in southern Connecticut called Wilton. And Wilton is the same now as it was 50 years ago. And it will be the same town 50 years from now. And that's because Wilton is exactly what it needs to be for the sort of people who move there. Wilton will never change. And that is in many ways a good thing. I moved to Boulder 10 years ago, and this city feels different now than when it was just 10 years ago. And from many conversations I've had with people I know who've lived here their whole lives, it was different 10 years before that, and 10 years before that. This city seems to undergo constant and rapid change, and that is probably due to many different factors, but most of all, the fact that many people have been moving here for the past 30, 40, 50, 100 years. Right now I'm outside of Cosmo's Pizza. This is like my favorite pizza place, which, by the way, if you're from New England, you're not gonna find New England pizza out here, but this is pretty good. There is good pizza out here. If the proposal goes through to renovate this entire center, Cosmo's will be one of many shops to be ousted, and I'll be sad to see it go. But that is the nature of change. And even though I'll be sad, it might still be a good thing, depending on how nice it is what they put in here. I put change as the last subject of today's video, and I actually am putting it here as a pro and a con, because change really is that. It's hard for really anyone to make an argument that change is good or bad, usually because this sort of change we're talking about is typically arising because there's a lot of people who want it. There's also a lot of people who don't want it. A lot of people feel like the dark horse is a cultural icon, but I'm willing to bet that those people who maybe have lived in Boulder for 50 years probably had qualities about the town that they felt would be better to be changed when they were young, that people 50 years here before them thought were cultural icons. And now I bring that up not to invalidate them or to say that the dark horse isn't a cultural icon that should be preserved, but more so to open this discussion that change is rarely one-sided, and it's also rarely simple to decide on who's right or who's wrong, or if there even is a right or wrong in that sort of conversation. But the point is, it's consistent in the city. And while in general I'm the proponent of change, and I think change is a good thing, usually, I do have sympathy. You know, in Allen Meadows, this big field where I grew up, it's like big open fields where kids play soccer and so on. There's this big tree in the middle of all these fields. And as a kid, I used to lay in the grass under this tree, like in soccer practice in between games, and we just hang out under this tree, you know, walk along the roots. And I went back one day a couple years ago, and I saw that they mulched in a circle around this tree. Not a far circle, maybe like 5 feet away from the base of the tree. They mulched this circle, and they put benches down under the tree for people to sit. You know, it's probably a Boy Scout project or something. And I remembered just like being so upset, so heartbroken. All the memories I had laying in the grass under this tree, and here someone has come along and put mulch down and these benches for people to sit on, as if the grass itself wasn't perfectly well good enough. I mean, I was heartbroken, devastated by these benches. I can't imagine what it would have felt like to me had I seen the entire town center bulldozed and rebuilt, new apartment buildings popped up in the old forests, or maybe that park torn up with half of it put pavement in and a concession stand, and all these renovations done in the name of improving the town. I would have been heartbroken. I can't imagine how some people in Boulder feel, where something like that might happen just in a matter of 10 years. My home is still my home, and I can return there and I can go back. I can relive my memories. So I do have a lot of sympathy for the people who are particularly unhappy about any kind of change, because I'm that kind of person. I would be super unhappy about change in Wilton, but you know, we do always have to remember that there are people who will exist beyond us, and we have to think about, you know, how do we make this place better for them? And, you know, is it better? Is this change we're going to do actually be good for everyone, regardless of how you or I feel about it, right? And maybe the answer is no, but you know, that's a critical conversation we have to have, as opposed to just saying no change at all. And many people in Boulder have some level of animosity about people from other places coming here and changing the place. And again, I don't think there's really a right or wrong. I think that if someone moves here and they become a tax-paying resident, they have every right to participate in the direction of the city as anyone else. Though if there's one point I would make, it's that if you are coming to the city from another state and you're not familiar with the culture, that's okay. And like, it's great to have you. I hope you enjoy it as well as everyone else does. And I'm sure people who've lived here longer than me would say the same thing. But you know, it's worth being respectful and thoughtful about the people who grew up here and who called this place home for a long, long time. I don't know, it's like kind of a somber thing, because even I feel sad. I've only been here for 10 years, and even I feel sad seeing things go. Like, if the proposal goes through for this shopping center and it ends up being a wonderful thing, then that's wonderful. But, you know, I'll still be a little sad seeing it go. And I think you should be prepared for that. As someone who comes here, is be prepared for the fact that many things changed in the city and that they'll continue to. You know, Boulder's a desirable area, and that is not changing anytime soon. The mountains aren't going anywhere. The trails aren't going anywhere. The lovely climate, certainly not going anywhere. Well, it's getting warmer though. And I bring up the dark horse, but look, there's always something going on in the city. There's always something changing, and there's always people who feel great about it, and there's always people who don't. Now, I don't really know how to end this segment. I think we've had a really nice conversation the past couple of days, kind of talking about what's great about this town, about the drawbacks it has. You know, Boulder's a great place to live, but it's not perfect. It's not utopia. I think the best way for me to end this video is the way I end every video, which is with an advertisement. Look, it's only half a joke. If you come in here and you need help and, you know, you want to find a nice place to call home in this city, give me a call, shoot me an email. I'm happy to help you out. I'll buy you pizza if you want pizza. I'll buy you pizza. It's really good, trust me. And if you're coming from New York, that ain't a small gesture, okay? This slice was $5 after tip, all right? So, you know, I don't cheap out for my clients. But, you know, I think that this is a really great place for a lot of people, and it's awesome to have people move here and watch them, you know, over the months of settling in, like, be happier. Like, enjoy the weather and enjoy being outside. And, you know, yeah, like the houses are expensive, whatever, but people really do. It really does change a lot of people's lives to come out here. People are just happy. It's happy out here, you know? Boulder's a good place to be.